Good morning. Today I am going to talk to you about the progressive era of history, and I really wanted to teach this face to face because there really are a lot of activities that we could have done with it. But I'm going to do my very best to teach them to you remotely instead, and I'll still try to give you the information that you need to know, and I'll try to throw in some creative stuff too just to make it fun. So, progressive era. We are talking about the 1890s to the 1920s. As you notice throughout history, since we've been studying together since August, historians tend to break down our history of our country into eras, and it helps us define those eras and helps us put things in order and understand things a little bit better. We started out with exploration and went on to colonization, and then we went on to American Revolution, et cetera, et cetera. Well, now we've moved away from the Civil War and Reconstruction. Remember that Reconstruction kind of ended around 1877. Slavery was gone. It was illegal. There is still a lot of racism, though, and we'll see that continue on into the 1960s. We just wrapped up the Industrial Revolution and a lot of stuff on immigration. And if you remember from our immigration studies, there were a lot of people coming into America during this time. Hundreds of thousands of immigrants coming from primarily European nations, but from all over the world, really, because of the incredible opportunities that America gave to people. You didn't have to know the language. You didn't have to have a lot of money. You didn't have to, you know, be able to afford this huge new house when you got here. There were opportunities for people who had little education. There were opportunities for people who didn't speak the language. We talked about our genealogy, and I told you about my grandmother's family tree. They came over in the 1890s from Germany. And I mentioned to you that a lot of people would come over together as family units or as one community because at least they would know someone when they got to their new environment. They would know someone who spoke their language and someone to help them out. So that just being together was helpful for a lot of people. It made life easier coming to a brand new country. So if you did the work that was in the worksheets on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you read about the immigration that happened during this time period. You looked at a chart of the people who came over to America, and you saw that primarily they were European. This is going to make a lot of changes, especially in the cities. And if you think about it, one of the questions on your writing prompt was, why do you think that people came in to live in the cities rather than going to the South? So think about, we're still, we still hold that early economy of America. It still is kind of true today in a way, if you think about it. We know that in the North, particularly the Atlantic seaboard area, that's where all your factories are. Okay, well, as progression took place throughout our history, that industry still stayed toward the north, and it moved west, further and further west. We're getting Missouri, and then we get into Ohio and Detroit, Michigan. We get into Wisconsin. We get into the northern states, and they're still hanging on to that industry. What was in the South? Okay, that was your plantations in the 1860s, and they're still growing down there. Okay, we still have the warm weather, we still have the good soil. So even though that we don't have the large scale plantations and the slavery and all that happened during the Civil War era, the South has rejoined the Union with Reconstruction, and a lot of people just are not moving to the South during this time period. It's still a poor area in the nation, and the cities are going to catch up with that very quickly because things in the cities are going to be just inundated with new people. They're not going to have a place to put everyone. People are going to be living in slums. There's not going to be enough money. Everybody in the family is going to have to work, even the small children. So those are kind of things that we're going to move into. The progressive era is going to be one of changes for the nation and people starting to think about, hey, this is our country. What can we do to make things better? Okay, so let's move forward on our slide. Okay, I'm on slide 2 right now. The heading is Key Ideas. And the first bullet says Purification of the Government, a focus on family and education, prohibition, and women's suffrage. A lot of corruption going on in the government during this time period, and a lot of people are going to start to put their foot down and see that this isn't right. We need to make some changes to purify the government. Focus on family and education. That's extremely important. I know it is to you as well, that families need to be valued, and we need to see how we can build up those families in our country to make a stronger nation for us all. Prohibition. You may or may not have heard this term before. This is outlawing alcohol. We find that alcohol has become a huge issue with people, especially in the cities. It is a good moneymaker, but it also leads to a lot of social unrest, a lot of people doing things that they shouldn't do, a lot of bad choices. So we're going to talk about that, and we're going to move on with women's suffrage. Suffrage is, again, the right to vote. So we learned with the Reconstruction Amendments, the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, that we freed the slaves, we made them citizens, and black men can vote. 1865, guys, women still have not found the right to vote. They're still fighting for those rights, and we're in the early 1900s now. Muckraking journalism. 18th and 19th Amendments. Okay, those are going to be some things that come along. Muckraking, you may have never heard that term before. It's okay, we're going to talk about it. Political leaders. Theodore Roosevelt and Herbert Hoover were Republicans, and we have Woodrow Wilson on the Democratic side. If you are one of these students who did your president reports over one of those presidents, congratulations, you're already going to have some background knowledge. Theodore Roosevelt is often cited as the first progressive president. He's known for his trust-busting activities. We're going to get into that and explain a little bit more. The progressives did little for civil rights or the plight of the African American, as the Supreme Court affirmed the constitutionality of many racist Southern laws. That sounds like a big mouthful. Okay, progressives, these are the people who tried to make change during this time period. They did little, they didn't do very much for civil rights. Okay, African Americans are still struggling during this time period. Yes, slavery is outlawed. However, just because you make a law and you change it doesn't change the way people think. 50 years after the end of the Civil War and the end of slavery, people are still holding on to that racism. Okay, that's going to be a problem. A lot of people are going to try to make changes with that. However, the Supreme Court is going to do all they can to leave things status quo, which means they don't want to help society make changes. They're going to affirm or convict. They're going to say, yes, this is constitutional, that the South can have these racial laws. Okay. Moving on to slide 3, another slide. Here we go with key terms. Muckraker. A muckraker is an investigative journalist of the Progression era. Muckraker's work, people would go in, if you remember correctly, we talked about the reformists, and we talked about Dorothea Dix, and we talked about, who was the other one I'm thinking of? Oh my gosh, I lost her name. That Dorothea Dix and the other lady, Nellie Bly, that went into the insane asylums and pretended to be crazy just so they could write this journalism. They could write about the problems that they saw with society and hopefully get things fixed. Okay, that's something we're going to see here going on. These muckrakers, this is a term that has been put upon these journalists. They were angry. They were upset with the way society was treating each other as a nation. And so they went into different environments to try to see what was going on, and they wrote very honestly and very candidly about the issues that that our country was facing. We're going to be learning about Upton Sinclair. Upton Sinclair was a novelist. If you've ever, well, you may not have read The Jungle. It's a pretty lengthy book. Photographer Jacob Riis, we're going to talk about him, and a journalist called Ida Tarbell and Lincoln Steffens also. Were muckrakers. I mean, it sounds like a negative term, and in a way it could be, but these guys are also going to be responsible for bringing about social change. Progressivism. I'm on key terms. I'm on slide number 4. Progressivism. If you think about the word progressive, you're moving forward. So this is a political ideology that favors rational governmental action to improve society. So people are saying, we need the government to step in and improve some things in society. This is our nation, guys. This is our home. This is our community. We need to figure out how to make things better for everyone. It arose in response to industrialism and dominated American politics for the first 2 decades of the 20th century. That says that the government and politics from 1900 to 1920 are going to be dominated by the idea of this improving society. And it is the idea of progressive era itself. That's what we're talking about. The 18th Amendment, okay, this one is going to say that alcohol is illegal in 1920. No more drinking alcohol, no more making alcohol, no more selling alcohol. And then the 19th Amendment, here we have finally women's suffrage after so many years of women not having the right to vote and have been fighting for this right for years and years and years. This is where we're coming in. So we have the 19th Amendment, constitutional amendment ratified or approved by Congress in 1920, granted women the right to vote and forbade any suffrage restrictions based on gender. That means that no entity can say that a person cannot vote because they are a woman or a man. Men and women both are allowed to vote with the 19th Amendment to the Constitution. We have slide number 5. So what is the progressive era anyway? The progressive era was a period of widespread social activism and political reform across the United States from the 1890s to 1920s. Okay, so what does that mean? Social. Okay, if you think about social, let's break this down a little bit. I don't expect you to know all these terms, so we're going to talk about them. Social means having to do with people and your community. You guys are very social. I know you are. You love to go talk to your friends. Your social community right now, well, right now it's at home, obviously, but ordinarily your social community is Rayburn. These are your people. This is your place. Okay, this is where you are for the majority of your time. Activism. Activism means making changes for the better. These are people who, if you're an activist, it means you want to make changes. You want to make your world better. See if you can think of some social activists or any type of activists just off the top of your head. How about Diane Fossey with the Gorillas? Who else is an activist that you can think of? Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was an activist, a social activist. He sought to make things better for the African Americans and for all races to get rid of racism. So we put those two things together. Social, having to do with people, and activism is making changes for the better. Social activism means people trying to make changes that make life better for us all. And thank heavens those people are around and they have the courage to really try to make some changes for our nation and for our communities. And isn't encouraged what we're talking about for the month of March for our Essential 8? Yeah, it is. Okay, stay tuned for the